When the YOLOBOX first launched in 2020, I was super excited about all the possibilities for building super portable live streaming kits, especially considering how much stuff is built right into the device. I've been doing live streaming and video production for almost 10 years now, and most of my kits were either built around the Blackmagic ATEM switchers, the rack mount ones, or going for something more portable like the Sling Studio, or sometimes even using both together. Most of my live streaming work before I started this YouTube channel has been filming conferences and small events. Once everything shut down in 2020 and all of my work training switched to virtual events, I've had a much different kind of need for streaming devices. But my work travel is starting to ramp back up, and I'm wanting to do live streams while I'm traveling. But that's usually not the main reason I'm traveling, so I like to actually have that streaming kit be super small and not take up much space in my suitcase. The YoloBox Pro was a very welcome upgrade from the original, and it made it much more powerful. It's been an amazing piece of gear that I've brought with me on nearly every trip. And then I'm able to run live streams even when I'm not in town. The YoloBox Mini is a tiny version of the YoloBox that still has all the graphics features of the Pro too. But this is not a video about the YoloBox. I've got plenty of other videos about the YoloBox on my channel. I will make sure to link them below if you're interested. So instead, in this video, I'm going to describe 3 completely new devices I would like to see from YoloLive, the company that makes the YoloBox. So first, I want to set some ground rules about the kinds of things I'm going to be asking for. I want to focus on the type of gear that I think YoloLive would be the perfect company to make. The YoloBox devices are essentially a custom version of the Android operating system running on custom hardware that they designed. And while I'm sure this is no surprise to you that I prefer using specialized hardware over things like running OBS on a general purpose computer, there are of course still things that are better done in software versus running on dedicated hardware like the ATEM Mini. So I want to focus on YoloLive's expertise on designing custom solutions around Android devices and take advantage of what you can do in that kind of environment. For example, there is no need for YoloLive to go and make a device that works exactly the same as the ATEM Mini. Instead, it's a lot more interesting for them to make a device that does a lot of things that Blackmagic would never include in the ATEM Mini, like built-in graphics generators and features for bringing in remote guests. So with that out of the way, let's get into the details of the 3 new devices I would like to see. Let me know if you'd be interested in buying any of these, how much you'd be willing to pay, or even feel free to suggest your own ideas too. First, I want to talk about a mini presentation switcher. This is actually something I've been wanting someone to make for literal years now. There are a few devices that get close, but nothing quite exactly right. The main use cases for this device are doing presentations with a camera and slides, both for virtual events in Zoom or other video conferencing software, as well as in-person events where you also need to share your slides to the in-room projector. And in both cases, you want to be able to also record or live stream the event while capturing both the video of the presenter as well as their slides. Ideally, you'd be able to record and live stream a nice layout showing both their face and their slides side by side, kind of like this, and also have an image in the background you can use to show the conference branding or event branding. The reason this is first on my list is because this is by far the most common situation I've found myself in both before and during the pandemic. Let's start with a case where you're recording a presentation in a physical room. In this situation, you have 2 primary video sources, a video camera looking at the presenter and the presenter's laptop with HDMI out for their slides. Of course, you need their laptop to share the slides to the in-room projector as well, so everybody in the room can also see their slides. And that's the first challenge. You either need an HDMI splitter to connect from the computer and then send one copy to the projector and one to your video switcher, or you need the streaming device to have an HDMI output that can then pass through the input from the computer. For extra credit, it'd be great if we could also add in a second camera. For the camera, you'll probably want to have that camera in the back of the room and then zoomed in to show a close-up of the presenter at the podium. For the recording as well as the live stream, you mainly want to show the person and their slides side by side, usually cropping the video of the presenter since you don't really care about what's on the side of them. You may also want to have a title graphic on the live stream before the event starts, so you need some amount of basic graphics capabilities, at least showing a still image. And if this sounds like the YoloBox, it almost is, but not quite. The big difference is that you want that device itself to have an HDMI output that's actually a pass-through of one of the HDMI inputs. And that way you can feed the in-room projector from the device without bringing in additional hardware like an HDMI splitter. And ideally, it really is pass-through HDMI done with a dedicated chip, not going through the main CPU. That way you don't introduce new latency on the external projector display. And you would want to pass through the audio from the computer too. That way if somebody is playing a video, the audio gets included in the stream as well as sent out to the room. So to summarize, we need 2 inputs. We need one HDMI output that's a pass-through of one of the inputs. We need the ability to switch the main program between each input, a layout including both, and a title screen. And it should be able to record to an SD card as well as live stream. So far, it sounds a bit like the YoloBox Pro, but with a special HDMI out. But there's more. The other main use case for this would be recording and live streaming virtual presentations from within video conferencing software. You might be thinking, but you can just record or stream from within Zoom, right? Sort of. I did a video about this a little while ago, I'll link to it below. I explained the problem with recording or streaming directly from Zoom. Mainly, the quality just isn't very good, and you don't get a way to make nice layouts if you're sharing your slides and a camera. But then the other problem with trying to do this with an ATEM Mini Extreme is that the USB out of the ATEM is only the program feed. So if you make your nice layout on the ATEM, and then Zoom will also show that layout, which again is not what you want. So this mini presentation device should also have an alternative way to set it up for this situation. The key is that the USB output should be just a pass-through of the HDMI 1. That way you can connect a camera to HDMI 1, and your computer will see only that camera over the webcam, but you can be recording and streaming a side-by-side layout with your camera as well as the computer. Of course, in order to make this happen, you would plug your computer's HDMI into this box, which then again means you need a pass-through of that HDMI out to go into your monitor, which is another use of that HDMI pass-through I mentioned before. So then when you run your Zoom presentation, you use the USB output as the webcam in Zoom, that way it's just your camera. You share your external monitor in Zoom for the viewers there, and when you record or live stream, you'll be recording the nice side-by-side layout instead. Again, I've done this many times with my virtual presentations already, but it requires the ATEM Mini Extreme, as well as adding an additional USB capture card. So it's not exactly a small setup. The other thing that would make this device really special goes back to the use case of streaming an in-person event. I mentioned wanting to put a camera in the back of the room, that way you can get a good view of the presenter. Running long cables is always a challenge, so it would be amazing if this had the ability to add a wireless camera, and that way you don't have to run any cables. Of course, you can use a Hollyland or a Cine-i HDMI transmitter instead of a cable already, which definitely works fine, but how cool would it be if that were just built into the box? What if it had basically a Hollyland wireless receiver built in, and you could pair it with a Hollyland transmitter for your camera? Or you could do it the other way around, where you connect the presenter's computer to the HDMI transmitter, and it has a pass-through to go feed the projector. And then it sends a signal to the back of the room where you have your streaming device with a camera on a short cable. So you definitely can set up a rig like this today, but it requires either the ATEM Mini Extreme or the YoloBox Pro in order to get the nice side-by-side layout. But it also requires a bunch of extra hardware to make it all come together. It would be really great to have this all in a single box to make it super easy to use for recording presentations and meetups. Now let's talk about a completely different kind of device for a completely different use case. One of the hardest things still to do is to include remote guests in a live stream. And this is where I think YOLO Live can really help. Now, before you jump into the comments and tell me that you've had no trouble bringing in remote guests into your podcasts with StreamYard or Ecamm or whatever, that is not exactly what I'm talking about here. I've said this many times before, that StreamYard is currently the easiest way to run a live stream with remote guests. And the reason is that it basically handles everything for you. The downside is you have to run your entire stream inside of StreamYard. It's not something you can really mix and match with local hardware. Other software-based switchers like Ecamm Live and vMix also have built-in remote guest features. And those are great, but they're also kind of tied to those solutions. So again, it's kind of hard to mix and match. YOLO Live also recently shipped a remote guest feature in the YoloBox itself, which is fantastic, but again, isn't quite what I'm talking about here. If you're running your whole live stream from the YoloBox, then by all means, use the built-in remote guest feature because it is super easy to use and it works seamlessly. But what I want out of a new device is something that combines the best of hardware and software switching. I've done a handful of gigs now that are a combination of in-person and remote presenters, and I prefer to run all the in-person stuff with my dedicated studio gear. In the most recent event, we had 2 remote guests, and I used 2 separate laptops, each running a viewer for the guest livestream brought in using video.ninja. It worked fine, but there were some quirks with the setup. But it also just feels like overkill to dedicate an entire computer to just running a full screen browser window. So this is all leading up to what I think would make a fantastic dedicated device from YOLO Live. Basically, it would be a hardware device for bringing in a remote guest into an existing studio. So the way it would work is this. The device would have one HDMI output and one HDMI input and a headphone port and an audio line in and out. It would have a touchscreen to configure it and preview the remote feed. It could probably be about the size of the YoloBox Mini. The only thing it does is it sends out a link to your remote guest, and when they visit the link in their browser, their camera and mic are received by this box and sent out the HDMI port. What they would be seeing in their browser is whatever's coming in on the HDMI input, and what they hear would be either the HDMI audio or the line input. So you could connect this into an existing studio switcher setup like the ATEM Mini Extreme. Run one of the outputs from the ATEM into this box, that way the guests can see the live program feed. Basically, think of this as a dedicated device for viewing a video.ninja feed, except it's also then actually connecting the call like video.ninja. We could even take this one step further and make a much larger version of this too. Imagine taking basically the same functionality of this little box, but now there are 4 of them and they're all combined into one device. So you'd have 4 HDMI outs, one for each of your 4 remote guests. You could connect each guest's HDMI output into one of the inputs of whatever switcher you're using, and your studio switcher output would go into this box, and that way they can see what's going on the stream. It's like the ultimate remote guest studio in a box, and you can integrate with whatever hardware you're already using. The bigger version of this is definitely for more pro users, so I could see some production studios using this as part of their studio gear. For that reason, I would expect it to be a 1U rack mount device rather than something shaped like the YoloBox. I would love to have that permanently installed in my rack here, that way I could just very quickly bring in a remote guest at the drop of a hat, without having to worry about fiddling with video.ninja on a separate computer. It would have to be a pretty powerful CPU to handle 4 remote guests, so for that reason I would also expect the price to be somewhat high. But I think it's okay for a pro piece of gear like this. Also, the alternative to this is either buying 4 laptops or buying a very powerful desktop computer with 4 Decklink cards in it, both of which end up being pretty expensive and pretty clunky options. The only other thing I've seen like this is Skype TX, which is used by broadcast TV stations. It's actually hardware made by a couple different companies that integrates with a special version of Skype, and it sends the Skype guest feed into your regular studio switcher. And while this is clearly a good solution, it is definitely out of reach of most smaller studios that want to bring in remote guests. So I really do think there's an opportunity for a much more affordable version of that kind of device. And based on the tests I've done with the new YoloBox remote guest feature, I think YoloLive could actually make a perfect device for this. The last new device I'd like to see is a combination of both of the previous ideas. This will be a box designed for hosting hybrid events. What do I mean by a hybrid event? Well, that's where there are both attendees and presenters in person and joining over the internet. We saw a huge shift towards online-only events in 2020, and in-person events are definitely starting back up again, but I suspect we will probably never return to the same level of in-person only events again. Hybrid events, when done well, can provide a lot of the benefits of both in-person and virtual events. When people can join an event remotely and participate in similar way as if they were actually there, it's a huge benefit for everybody, because it means people can participate in an event with all the costs associated with traveling. One of the best experiences I've had at a hybrid event on both the in-person and the remote side is actually at the IETF meetings. This is a standards organization that works on protocols that literally run the internet like HTTP, DNS, and the group that I'm part of, OAuth. There are 3 meetings a year in different cities each time, and if you can't make it to one of the cities, you can then join that meeting remotely. There has always been the ability to join remotely even before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, they've made a bunch of improvements to how they run these meetings, and it works really well now. If you're in the room, things are mostly normal and you don't really have to worry about whether there are remote participants. If you're presenting, you go up to the microphone. If you want to share slides, you can join the online meeting from your computer just to screen share, and you talk into the microphone. If you're in the audience and you have questions, you come up to the microphone in the middle of the room to speak. On the remote end, you see a video feed of either the person presenting or a camera that's pointed at the audience. And you can also see the slides. If you're planning on presenting remotely, you can then also turn on your own camera to join the meeting. And you and any other remote people are now shown on a separate projector in the room. So in the room, there are always 2 projectors. One is for the presenter slides and one shows all the remote people's cameras. The remote guests' audio feeds are also piped into the in-room speakers, so they sound just the same as the in-person presenters using the microphone. In order to pull this off, it's actually quite a lot of tech behind the scenes. They use a platform called Meet Echo, and they've been working closely with the company over the years to improve that software. There's also several Raspberry Pis in each meeting room to run the video feeds for the projectors and audio, but this is where I could see YoloLive coming in to provide an out-of-the-box solution for exactly this purpose. Everything would be based around this new box that would be in each meeting room. The box would have 2 HDMI or SDI outputs. One is for the presenters' slides and the other is for the video feeds of the remote guests. It would also have 2 HDMI or again SDI inputs for the 2 cameras. One camera is a close-up of the presenter and the other shows the crowd in the room. This box would then provide a way for multiple people to join the session over the internet, and then anybody in the call would have their video feed showing up on the remote guest screen. Anybody who wanted to share slides would join a link similar to joining with their camera, but that link would only allow them to share their screen, not their camera. So far, so good. But now what if you want to record or live stream this event? That's where we take some ideas from way back at the beginning of this. Ideally, you'd want to be able to have a side-by-side layout showing the current presenter's video, whether they were local in the room or remote, and that would be next to the screen they're sharing. In some cases, you might want the video to auto switch to the active speaker, but other times you want to be able to control which speaker is showing in the stream. So it does need to support both. This sounds almost like a regular video conferencing system that you would see installed in a meeting room like Zoom Rooms, but the main difference is in how much control you get and being able to produce a live stream and recording that looks like a highly produced event instead of one that looks like a Zoom recording. So these are the 3 new devices I would love to see happen. Let me know down in the comments which of these you are most excited about. And if you have any other ideas for these or other kinds of devices, I would love to know as well. You might be also interested in this video I recently made with Tom Buck, where we talked about what we want to see in a next generation YoloBox. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.